All right, fellas, here we go. Playoff time, and it's time for the commissioner's picks. And the commissioner picks are usually pretty good, even whether you don't like it or not, because you're not one of the picks. It is what it is. Numbers never lie. So let's go through it. As you guys know, and some of the newbies may not be familiar with how this works, but I usually will go back 3 to 5 games and look at who's been hot because as we know, it's not how many points you score, but when do you score those points. So if you're scoring a bunch of points early and then you tailing off at the end of the season, that's not a good thing. So I kind of go back, look at 4 or 5 weeks and see who's been picking it up, who's been slipping down as far as scoring, sliding down rather, and kind of make an assessment from there. So let's go through the matchups for the playoff. We'll do it just one game at a time and go from there. So let's start with 1-8 seed. We have Eagles versus No Limit. Now, here's what I noticed. Eagles is obviously the favorite, and they're the favorite probably going into the playoffs to some degree. I didn't realize that Bill's squad has actually slowed down a little bit. I think the last 2 games he's been in the 60s, which is very beatable, whereas early in the season he was constantly 80 plus. So that's something to be concerned about. Last 2 games, No Limit, on the other hand, after really being mediocre through weeks roughly 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the last couple of weeks, he's been in the low 60s, 60, 61. So head to head, those 2 teams have been playing pretty comparably over the last couple of weeks. Like I say, Bill's obviously the favorite in this game going into it, but there's a little vulnerability there that could make for a surprise. Wayne definitely needs to get some help here from where's in fact, he's got Andre Johnson. I mean, Ryan Tannehill, that was a big blow for him when he lost Aaron Rodgers, obviously. But he needs Ryan Tannehill's going against Pittsburgh. He needs Fred Jackson to play big. I mean, he needs just some of the players to step up because he's got Arian Foster out, Andre Johnson with Houston situation. So, I mean, Wayne just needs to have some players step up, have some big games. So, we'll see how that works out. The Eagles, on the other hand, need Drew Brees to get back on track. Obviously, last week against Seattle, he just didn't do anything. Adrian Peterson and Marshawn Lynch didn't do anything. Still put up, I think, 69 points, despite those big 3 not doing much. That's how strong the Eagles teams are. But like I said, right now, he's been showing a little bit of slowing down here over the last several weeks. So we'll see how that plays out. Number 2 and 7 seed. Could be an interesting game. Killer Bees, until he put up a stinker last week with 39 points, was actually about the hottest team going. He had a couple of 80, I think an 80-point game, a 100-point game, a 70, maybe 2 70-point games over the last 5 weeks. So Killer Bees, like if they had put up another 70-plus point game, I can honestly say they probably would have scored the most points over the last 4 or 5 weeks out of anybody. So just for fun, needs to be aware of that. Roethlisberger has shown to be explosive again, going up against Miami this week. Miami's D is not bad, so I don't know if we can expect a big game out of him. Le'Veon Bell's been doing, I guess, somewhat okay. Eddie Lacy, back again, Aaron Rodgers is out, so Green Bay's been struggling. Steve Smith, Garcon, Andre Brown. So, I mean, you look at it, it doesn't look overly threatening as a team, but the numbers, again, they don't lie. And he's been scoring up until last week. So Just for Fun's got to be aware of that. Obviously, Just for Fun with Peyton Manning has been one of the top 3 definitely consistent scoring teams over the last 4 or 5 weeks when I look back on it. In fact, Just for Fun may be the highest scoring team based on what I just said about the Killer Bees falling off last week over the last 4 or 5 weeks. So Rick definitely has to be considered as a number 2 seed, not just because of that, but because of the scoring that he's been doing the last 4 or 5 weeks as a definite potential favorite going in to the playoffs. Obviously, Peyton Manning having a hell of a season. Reggie Bush is having a good season. Gronkowski is back and playing well in New England, and got the number 1 kicker in Gostkowski. So Zach Stacy, Jared Boykin, obviously needs Denarius Thomas and Peyton Manning to hook up anytime that they get going. That leads to Rick having big games. So that's the matchup to watch. Is they're going up against Tennessee, probably a pretty good matchup for Denver. So Manning, Denarius Thomas, they hook up once or twice, and Peyton can put up a few touchdowns. Rick should be on his way to another high-scoring game. But like I say, the Killer Bees can go high-scoring with them. So that could be an interesting game to watch. 3-6, that's my squad, the boys, and Crusher. Crusher's been steady all season, been kind of up and down. They've been big one week, putting up 70, 80, 90 points, and then will come down and put up, I think 1 week here, the last 3 weeks, put up a 27-point game, went back up, scored 80, and then came down and put up, I think, like a 40 or 50-point game. So my squad has been fairly steady, not going too much below, or being in the 50s consistently over the last few weeks, last 5 weeks, in fact, but not being explosive and yet not going into the tank. So I probably have to catch MD on one of his down weeks, keep him down in the 50s and 60s, and then hope my squad can, step up and score some points. So I've got Rivers against the Giants, Shane Vereen. I'm going to have to roll with him since Ridley may still be in the doghouse. Jamal Charles against Washington. I got some good matchups as I'm looking here. MD, Russell Wilson's been playing consistently well here over the last several weeks, but they're going up against Seattle against San Francisco in San Francisco. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. He's got LaShawn McCoy against Detroit. Detroit's defense can be kind of tough against the run, so that might help me out. Wes Welker against Tennessee is not a bad matchup. Detroit against Philly with Calvin Johnson, probably not too bad of a matchup for Calvin Johnson. And then Lamar Miller, Vernon Davis against Seattle D. That's going to be a tough matchup. Chiefs are playing Washington. Potential for the Chiefs can do something there on D. So I think I got some matchup potential here that could help me pull something off here. But like I say, I got to catch him when he's not being explosive. And then finally, two teams that I was high on early in the season. And both of these teams have been fairly steady. They've been in that 4 to 6 range. They're the 4 and 5 seed, Bet Your Money and Illmatic. And they pretty much hovered around there. Illmatic won 7 in a row to finish the season out. Wasn't scoring a lot of points, but had been steady. Was being very consistent in scoring. That's why I kept touting him. And can be potentially explosive. Bet Your Money had a couple of good games, but when I look back 5 weeks, they had really been kind of struggling until the last couple of weeks when I think they put up something like some 60-point games, I believe it was, over these last couple of weeks. So this last week he had a 101-point game. So that was a big game, but I think all the games I looked at before this 101-point game for Bet Your Money were very mediocre. So Illmatic is probably the favorite going into that game based on consistency. And it just remains to be seen. Bet Your Money, like we saw last week, can be explosive. But Illmatic's been steady and has been kind of climbing these last few weeks slowly with that consistency. So that should be a definitely interesting matchup to see that 4 or 5 seed. They're probably as close as a 4 or 5 seed should be. So that's kind of where we are, fellas. It's a lot closer. When I sat down to do this, I really thought the Eagles were going to be the obvious favorite, but they're not. Like I say, just for fun, definitely in the mix. Crusher, if they can get steady here over the last few weeks, to be in the mix. Illmatic, Killer B. Everybody. I don't feel good about my squad. Don't like No Limit squad without Aaron Rodgers. But to me, the other 6 squads, I could see somebody getting on a roll and doing something. So we'll see how it plays out. But that's that's where we are going into the playoffs. So good luck. We start tonight, and we'll see how it all plays out. Peace.